Hi everyone, I come to you from the library. I don't have my little microphone today. I guess I just rushed out of the house. My car is making a weird internal sound, so if you hear something that sounds like an old-fashioned dot matrix printer in the background, that's this car. I can't figure it out. And it started sunshining unexpectedly. It was very gloomy just a few minutes ago. I had a few books on hold to pick up. I mean, I should just go without saying. But I did also pick a book off the shelf that I was searching for. I didn't know if they would have it. So let's see. Where do I want to start? I'll start with the one that I picked off the shelf. And that is, this will be my first fiction Joan Didion. I have listened multiple times, believe it or not, to her memoirs, which I absolutely love. Whoever is reading The Year of Magical Thinking and what's it called? Blue Nights is the second one. They're different audio readers, but I just put them on sometimes and just drop right into a part of the story. I've done that for a few years now. I just adore those memoirs on audio. But this will be my first fiction inspired by Nathan from Nathan's Nook, reading a lot of Joan Didion this year. So I'm going to give this a try. This is the only one they had on the shelf. So it's about Maria Wyeth. It says she's an emotional drifter who's become almost anesthetized against pain and pleasure. She finds herself in her early 30s, radically divorced from husbands, lovers, friends, her own past, and her own future. Actress, daughter, wife, mother, woman. She's played each role to the sound of one hand clapping. Wow. It's set in LA, Las Vegas, the barren waste of the Mojave. I love those places. I love those landscapes, especially the desert. So I should like that. Then, inspired by, who? If I remember, I'll put it in the notes, but I find myself with a Le Carre. I know there's another proper way to say his name, and I'm not saying it. But it was actually, it started with the documentary that's on now on Netflix called The Pigeon Tunnel. And it's Le Carre being interviewed and hearing his background and his family of origin, his parents, his dad. What a fascinating person. Oh my God. A con man, in essence, is how Le Carre would describe him. And then I heard a podcast where they were talking about, they might have been talking about this book, Call for the Dead. And I think this is his first book with the character named George Smiley. So that's why I picked up this one. And then what came in for me as a hold that I saw on Sarah's channel, Hardcover Hearts, is The Slaves of Solitude by Patrick Hamilton. I don't know who Patrick Hamilton is. Apparently he's written a few books, and this is a unique one because it is about, it has a female main character, which I'm getting the feeling that his other books don't. And it's a boarding house novel set in the Second World War. And I think this is about middle-aged Miss Roach, who retreats to the relative safety and stupefying boredom of the suburban town of Thames Lockton, where she rents a room in a boarding house. And that sets the stage for her interaction with different people at the boarding house. And I think that's what this has to do with, The Slaves of Solitude. So I'm looking forward to dipping in. Then another fiction that came in probably sooner than I wanted it to. Let me get the sticker off of this thing. Probably sooner than I wanted it to. I haven't read a whole lot about this book. but I had to have possession of the cover for a while because it has the prettiest cover. Oh my God, it's stunning. Stunning. That is not a normal looking cat. Maggie O'Farrell says, a monumental achievement of polyphony and humanity. I have heard from Bernie Lombardo, his Bookstagrammer channel talks about this book, and he's also just talked about it on Sean the Book Maniac's BookTube channel. A sweeping novel, so it is sweeping. It's a historic fiction about a solitary house in the woods of New England, told through the lives of those who inhabit it across the centuries. A daring, moving tale of memory and fate. Now, I can tell you, this is not the kind of book I normally read, so I have no idea. I have no idea if this is going to be for me, but we'll see. And then the monumentous Moscow, 1812. I saw this book on a couple channels. Oh, it's called Napoleon's Fatal March. And the only reason I know anything about Moscow, 1812 and Napoleon is that I'm reading War and Peace, and we are at that point, and now after that point in history when Napoleon has gone into Moscow and what famously happens after that. I was so mesmerized by that part of the story, which is of course based on history, that I mean, I could have just gone with Tolstoy's view of what happened afterwards and his opinions, because he certainly pontificates before each major part of the book, which I adore. I love reading his thoughts on everything. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to this book that I've heard some people talking about, so maybe it has a reliable author. It's by Adam Zamoyski. He was born in New York and educated at Oxford. He's written several books on different parts of history. He's drawn on the latest Russian research, as well as a vast pool of first-hand accounts in French, German, Russian, Polish, and Italian. Will I read this whole thing? Probably not. My head's not where it would need to be. I probably will handpick some chapters in this. I just don't have the tenacity to read a book like this right now. So anyway, that's what I have in this bag. I will let you know how things come along and what I end up dipping into. I'm sure I'll add maybe a reading update to this video to give you a sense of what I've dipped into. Hello everyone. I have a reading update for you. I want to talk about some of the books that I had in that library bag and which ones hit, which ones didn't. Today is Veterans Day, Friday, November 10th. I am a very proud mom of a veteran. My son served in the U.S. Air Force, and we are very proud of him and his service. So, what did I end up reading? Oh, by the way, I don't have my microphone on. I just didn't want to stick it on a nice sweater. So I actually have it here. I don't know if it's going to make any difference. If you could only... It's on my water bottle. Like a, you know, professional broadcaster. Except it's a lavalier mic. So I don't know. Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh yeah, I do have one book that I'm reading actually that I got myself into that's not from the library bag. Before I start though, two books that were not a part of that library haul that I'm going to try to move through these quickly. But one of them is the book that I began to talk about, which was a library book, and I returned it, which is Isle McElroy's People Collide. He's written one other novel called The Atmospherans, which I love the sound of that. So I'm going to talk about the premise of the book. The entire book is about the premise. The premise is pretty much in the name of the book. People collide. Two people collide in a magical realism kind of way, I guess you could say, or a fantastical way, kind of like the Freaky Friday movie, if you know what I mean. So if you don't want to know anything about that book, I would skip ahead until you see me talking about Daddy's Gone A-Hunting. So because the entire book, it's kind of like talking about the haunting of Hill House, knowing that you, in describing the story, even if you're not going to give away certain plot lines, that it is about the haunting of the Hill House. So People Collide is about Elizabeth and Eli, and I think they're American, and they go to Bulgaria for a year. Elizabeth has a teaching gig that they get overseas, and Eli, they're newly married. The book keeps it a bit of a mystery why they married, and it's a mystery to themselves too, which sets up an interesting premise. And Eli is bored, more bored than he's expected to be. I think he's getting odd jobs while they're there in the town that they're in, the small town. And he's trying to make the most of it. For whatever reason, yeah, their bodies switch, except it's their souls that switch, really. So Eli finds himself in the body of Elizabeth, and his discovery of that is really interesting. And then he discovers through a series of events that Elizabeth is in his body. So it sets up a tension from the beginning. You're wondering just the natural things like, is anybody going to find out? You, of course, have to put aside the reason why this is made possible or why it's happening, and just go along for the ride. So what Isle McElroy does with this premise, I feel is just this gentle thing, this very subtle plot, and you get to know how each person is experiencing the other person's body. How is it to be Eli in Elizabeth's body, Elizabeth in Eli's body, and that's interesting. And then it gets even more interesting when they are interacting with the people that they ordinarily interact with, whether it's the people in Bulgaria or family members. So I felt like this book grew on me. The experience of reading the book really grew and blossomed after I was done reading it. So I highly recommend it. This is not the kind of book I would normally read. I saw Isle McElroy in an interview with Jaylen from Bar in the Bookcase, and that's what really got me interested in the book. So try it out. It's an interesting one that really starts to unfold, I feel, even after. Excellent, smart, creative writing. All right, Daddy's Gone A-Hunting. I finished this, my second Penelope Mortimer, and what started off for me as a very standard setup, very similar to The Pumpkin Eater. These are women in both books who are married and whose job it is to have children and run the family while the husband goes off and works. I think this was published in 1958. And now her boys are in boarding school for like 9 months of the year, and her daughter is now out of school and going off to college. So she really is an empty nester. And sure, she could be doing the social things that are expected of her to be doing in her neighborhood. These are people that are upper class. They're not upper echelon class, but they are upper class and have plenty of means. And she starts to unravel and feel so unmoored. This is before the time of Betty Friedan. Right before that time, her daughter would be embracing different ways of thinking about how to be, or her opportunities in the world rather than her mother. The mother, the main character, is Ruth, and she's married to Rex. They don't have a very good relationship. They've definitely strayed from each other. And Rex just wants to go off to work. And he's away in the city all week. He has an apartment there. And so there's some things going on, some tensions in that relationship. And then her daughter, who has the typical strained relationship in that things are really moving forward in her daughter's generation. I think her daughter's name is Angela. So things are really moving forward in Angela's generation, and that makes the divide between a typical 19-year-old or so even greater at this time than normal. And she has to confide in her mother because she needs her mother's help. She needs her financial help. She just needs her help in figuring out this challenge that she's faced with. And I won't go into details because I don't want to spoil it. But it certainly gives her mother, and you see this very subtly through Penelope Mortimer's excellent writing, you see her building her strength. She has purpose. This is not explicitly written at all in this story. It's so beautifully done. You don't know how the story is going to turn out. They're both trying to keep this issue from Rex. Because she's having what is clearly a nervous breakdown, Rex has hired a woman to be at the house to just watch over Ruth. Ruth, of course, hates this. You at times get frustrated with this this caretaker, and at other times I certainly had empathy for her, but she's a great monkey wrench in all of this. And it's fantastic to see how going through this challenge with Angela somehow brings them together. At least Ruth feels that way. Her daughter just wants to get on with life. And she feels in the end, it's a beautiful thing to see how Ruth feels in the end of the story versus how she feels in the beginning. I don't want to spoil any of it because I didn't know anything going in, but the journey that she takes through this experience and the freedom, for some reason, freedom, even though she's still in the house, even though she's still an empty nester, why does she feel that way? Well, that's what the story reveals. So I really recommend this. Okay. All right. What did I not connect with? Wait, I have to actually take a drink of water out of my microphone bottle. I decided to put aside for now the fiction called Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. It's excellent. I've started it. I just have too many things that I'm into now. So I think I'm going to put this aside, but only because of limited time. And the thing that I'm really enjoying is this Patrick Hamilton Slaves of Solitude. I remember how much Sarah from Hardcover Hearts loved this book a few months ago. I am just smitten with the writing style in this book of Patrick Hamilton. I don't know if this is how he always writes, but I guess I would explain it that if there was a sentence that he's writing that would be absolutely fine with 10 words, he's going to use 15. And that's not a bad thing. He constructs beautiful sentences with lots of commas in there. I think I have something, I have something marked here to read out. So Miss Roach is the main character. She's in her 30s, maybe she's something like 38. She's had to move to a suburban town during the Second World War because she's been bombed out of London. So as she's going to work and then coming back into the boarding house, there's a lot of opportunity for interaction with the mainstays of the boarding house. And as she's coming back into the boarding house in the evening, we're being introduced to some of these regular characters. One of them is Mr. Thwaites. This Thwaites was a big, tall man, anything between 60 and 70. He had a fresh complexion and was, for his years, and for one who took practically no exercise, unusually healthy and virile. That's the first long sentence with a lot of commas. He resounded nasally and indefatigably with a steady health and virility. He was, above all, a steady man in all his ways. In his large, flat, mustachioed face, with its slightly flattened nose as though someone in the past had punched it, in his lethargic yet watchful brown eyes, in his way of walking and his way of talking, there could be discerned the steady, self-absorbed, dreamy, almost somnambulistic quality of the lifelong trampler through the emotions of others, of which Miss Roach would call the bully. That's another long sentence. Oh my gosh. That is such a small example. It just makes the story so much more colorful because you're just getting so much bang for your buck. And I'm very early in the story. I'm only on page 56, but Miss Roach also goes to a tavern nearby sometimes that is acceptable for her to go to as a single woman, and especially now that it's wartime. Apparently, normally this would really not be acceptable for her to be thought of as a fine young woman if she arrived at a tavern by herself. And we can see that she's meeting and making friends with a German woman named Vicky Kugelman. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I would love to know anyone that is a Patrick Hamilton fan. What other books do you love of his? I started Northwoods. I read the first section of Northwoods, the first couple stories. I'd say about the first 100 pages, and I am putting it aside only because it is a very long book. I really love the writing. I love the story of the creation of an apple orchard around this house that is the center of the story of Northwoods. I really like the writing. It is in competition for a lot of other books that I'm reading now, so that's why I'm putting it aside. But this is going to be a favorite book of a lot of people, and I might come back to it. I'm just feeling really eager to keep reading the books that I'm reading. But I'm glad that I at least dipped into it for now. It will be there for me at the library if I ever choose to pick it up again. And then I am finally getting around to a book that I heard about on Charles's BookTube channel. The name of his channel is Seesop, which I'll list below. And this is one of Charles' favorite books, Foreign Affairs by Alison Lurie. And it won a Pulitzer Prize. It was written in the 80s. I started it once. I had it out of the library. I put it aside, and then I just ordered it used because I just knew that if it was laying around, I would finally pick it up. I complained a little bit to Charles that these copies, both of them that I've had, I said at first that the font was small. I don't think it's any smaller than any of the Penguin Trollope books that I've read. It's actually that the font is gray and not black. So it is hard to read, harder than other books because of that. But, I just got on with it. I stopped complaining. And I just dove in, and I actually have tabbed the first page because her writing already got me. It's about a 50-something unmarried tenured professor who gets a grant to go to London for a year, and she's going to work on her new book about children's folk rhymes. Her name is Virginia. She goes by Vinny. And what I loved about the first page was it says that she's getting ready to get on the plane. It starts off, on a cold, blowy February day, a woman is boarding the 10 a.m. flight to London, followed by an invisible dog. And then it goes on to tell you a little bit about Virginia. Then, the dog that is trailing Vinny, visibly only to her imagination, is her familiar demon, known to her privately as Fido and representing self-pity. She visualizes him as a medium-sized, dirty, white, long-haired mutt, mainly Welsh Terrier, sometimes trailing her silently, and other times whining and panting and nipping at her heels, running around in circles trying to trip her up, or at least get her to stoop down so that he may rush at her, knock her to the ground, and cover her with sloppy kisses. Vinny knows that Fido wants to get on the plane with her, but she hopes to leave him behind, as she has successfully done on other trips abroad. Recent events, however, and the projected length of her stay make this unlikely. And so now I'm just at a point where Vinny is still on the plane. She's being asked by this, I think, Texan man to share her newspaper, and she eventually gives him a book. I'm only on page 20, and it's so rich. I'm really enjoying it. So I'm finally getting to that. It's very early days. We will see. Then finally, this Moscow 1812 Napoleon's Fatal March book by Adam Zamoyski. I read the introduction. I read the first chapter because the first chapter sets up the stage about Napoleon and gives you just a tiny bit of history leading up to why Napoleon even started a war with Russia. You do get a sense of that in War and Peace. But then the second chapter is Alexander. So we're going to hear a little bit about Tsar Alexander, which of course I've read a whole bunch about in War and Peace. But yeah, I love this writing, and I love what's really cool in bringing things to life for me in the context of being in War and Peace for so long are these maps, because it really sets out what Napoleon's conquered and what his fiefdom is and what he is hoping to bring into his kingdom. So I'm really liking it so far. I don't know if this is the version that Joe Spivey on his channel with the same name read for Nonfiction November. It looks the same, but some of it's a little different. It doesn't matter. It's the same author, and I'm loving it. So I'm glad that I heard about this from his channel. He's doing really cool videos for Nonfiction November, by the way. It's really worth going over and taking a look for that and other things. And looking ahead, just really quickly, speaking of these monthly prompts that the BookTube community so wonderfully does, I watched a video by Aaron Facer. He has a BookTube channel, and he was talking about this December prompt called Remember December, where it just reminds you, if you wanted to reread a book, maybe December is a good time to do it if you wanted to do it in 2023. And his video about that, his plans for Remember December, brought up the book The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And I have fond memories of reading that book. I mean, it's not an easy, fun book to read, but I do have memories of reading it. But like, that was over 30 years ago. So I remembered seeing it on my daughter's bookshelf, and she only lives like 20 minutes from me. So the next time that I see her, she's going to bring it to me. It may be my copy. I don't know. I'm interested to see it. I've seen it on her shelf, but only the spine. So I'll get to see it up closer when she brings it to me. That's it. That's a lot. I really would love to hear from all of you about any of these authors. My gosh, so many fantastic things that I've talked about here. Patrick Hamilton, Foreign Affairs by Alison Lurie. Has anyone else read that? And of course, Penelope Mortimer. Please join in the conversation. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you on the next one.